Cool.
It's like, well,
I'll try to get all this stuff. Yeah, I'll go. They had some hand sanitizer stuff in there.
that might help pull it out
Yeah, that's what
because
I'm thinking.
alcohol.
Yeah.
Or stain it.
Yeah. You're still rolling.
David will always be the EDC. We'll sign it. Like it was here.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cloud Simplified. With joined here with Matthew Puckett.
Sidekick, yes.
Yeah, sidekick. Yep.
I'm totally sidekick.
So this is another special edition where we're shooting live here at the Microsoft Executive Briefing Center.
Yep.
Well, I guess not really live to you, but we're on site at the Executive Briefing Center.
Yep.
And we have some folks from some guests from our core engineering services. Circa. What they were previously called, MSIT.
Bad word. Bad word.
We just learned from our prior guests that no longer referred to as this monolith IT organization.
Okay.
And we're joined here today with David, who's going to talk a bit about how we've moved to leveraging capabilities in Azure for extending our network here on campus at Microsoft into the cloud, and how we put some guardrails and boundaries in place to be able to secure services and traffic that is occurring between existing systems on premises or by employees that are here on campus accessing workloads that are deployed in Azure. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done, some of the challenges we face. Certainly, I'm sure they're applicable to many of you.
More dog food.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. So David, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So why don't we tell everyone a little bit about your background, kind of what kind of falls under your purview?
Falls under my purview. I've been with Microsoft now for coming up on 20 years. Most of it in the system space, working in the on-premises data centers, the old world, and moved into the networking discipline about 5 years ago, around the time we were really starting to move toward public cloud in earnest. I'm now challenging 25, 30 years worth of networking history and security practices and traditional IT operational practices as we embrace cloud mobility, rethink the whole security model, and again, the way that we operate in the cloud is, I think, somewhat different now, moving away from centralized IT to this whole DevOps type of model.
Walk in the park, right? This is easy stuff. Do it tomorrow, right? It's done.
Getting away from that situation where you have that great wall, so to speak, around kind of your network perimeter.
Yeah, the old days where inside we thought was safe and trustworthy, right? The old corporate network, and everything outside the wild internet was unsafe, dangerous,
untamable.
So in the cloud world, that you could one could deem some of those using that paradigm, one could deem anything in the cloud to be unsafe using that model because it's all internet facing endpoints.
Or you could try to extend your on-prem model, your old legacy model, into the cloud,
hybrid.
which is not necessarily a bad thing. Hybrid, or just take your infrastructure as a service that you're running on premises with something like Microsoft Hyper-V and translate it into Azure IaaS VMs.
Yeah.
And extend your own private network into Azure using ExpressRoute.
Yeah.
So a lift and shift model.
Lift and shift type of model, which it works for legacy workloads. It's a great thing to do to get you out of managing your own private footprint on premises, but we also see people wanting to move to PaaS, modernize your applications, or commoditizing what you're doing into a SaaS model that's delivered through the internet. And again, that traffic it's no longer going east-west between your private facility and your own private data center. It's now leaving your network.
Right.
So it's going out your public edge to some public endpoint that you have to make a determination that is where you want to go. That is the legitimate service endpoint you're trying to reach. And then you might not want to treat that as the dangerous hostile internet. You might want to treat it a little differently.
So thinking how some customers have wanted to extend their old way of thinking and doing things like hairpinning traffic. So now you've extended your data center into Azure, and now you want to do all the stateful packet inspection stuff that you traditionally do, and force all that traffic back over your connection that you have to the cloud to do all the traditional things. Like what model have we embraced here at Microsoft?
So I will admit to you that we have done that.
Okay.
So when we first started moving into Azure, it was largely lift and shift IaaS. We took the traditional data center model and picked it up from where it was in the old on-prem data centers. We plunked it right in front of Azure. And we used force tunneling with ExpressRoute to pull the traffic out of Azure, send it through our security controls and monitoring stack, and then guess what? We sent it right back into Azure.
Yeah.
That was, I won't say it's the only way you could have done it when we first started doing this more than 5 years ago, but that was the way that actually worked. So Azure's matured a lot since then. New capabilities that weren't there way back when are there now. User-defined routes, VNet peering, a rich ecosystem of appliances and services that you can now connect to Azure that just wasn't there when we first started down this road.
Right.
So the old, technique of basically pulling your traffic out and backhauling it to a security stamp and then sending it right back in the cloud.
They use a lot of bandwidth.
Uses a lot of bandwidth. It can harm the application functionality sometimes.
Yep.
So it can impact the performance.
So you have round trip of you have two VMs sitting in Azure, and for them to talk to one another.
They could be on the same host for all you know.
Right. So they have ample bandwidth in the cloud, but now you're forcing it over a circuit back to
Correct.
do
So you're
stuff.
incurring latency. It could be, creating some kind of bandwidth bottleneck. Even if it's not noticeable at first, you can build yourself into a situation where it does become performance impacting, and it is at a cost to you. So any of the traffic that you pull out of Azure is potentially going to cost somebody money.
Yeah, there's an egress charge.
There's an egress
Anything
charge.
leaving an Azure region.
But it's
costs money.
chewing up, electricity and network bandwidth. All that stuff comes at a price.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we solve that? I mean, you mentioned some of the things that exist, in Azure, VNet peering, allowing take two virtual networks in Azure and basically extend a virtual patch cable between them. Like what sorts of things have we specifically done?
Instead of doing the old way of basically, putting everything on different circuits, using force tunneling to pull the traffic out of Azure and put it through our security stamp, what we're doing now is we're moving to an architecture now that uses services in Azure like the Azure firewall. So rather than pulling the traffic out of Azure, sending it through our security stamp to send it out our own internet edge, we actually can use Azure's internet edge and send it through their security service to get some of the capabilities that we only had with an on-prem firewall before. We could get it with a virtual appliance from a third party today, but why not use the native Azure functionality?
Right.
To do things like URL,
Right.
URL filtering, to do category-based filtering at some point in the future. To get all the things that would have required a more traditional looking firewall investment, we can now get with Azure services.
And that just became generally available like a week or two ago.
Yes.
And to summarize, that instead of using a virtual appliance, I mean, we have many ISV vendors that are partners of ours, so we don't necessarily want to say any of them are bad, but this is a first-party Azure capability that doesn't require a virtual appliance that you have to take care of the care and feeding, patching, keeping the software up to date. Now you have just a service you can configure to protect outbound traffic from Azure. So we have massive pipes leaving our data centers. So instead of having that traffic coming back over some circuit size, a gigabit or up to 10 gigabits, so actually we have up to 100 gigabits now in some case. But it is bandwidth constrained. There's some tier of service you have to pay for. Instead of forcing all of that traffic that's internet bound to go over that tunnel and then out over your circuit, you can now configure all of these policies in Azure.
Yes.
Okay.
So, virtual appliances are incrementally better, I would say, than physical appliances, right? Especially dragging the traffic out of the cloud to get it to your physical appliance. But with virtual appliances, you still have to think about placement, topology, and they're creating workbooks and virtual machine scale sets that will automatically scale these things. But there's still a lot of complexity that you incur, right? You're just trading physical complexity for logical complexity.
Exactly.
But consuming it as a service is definitely the direction that we want to go. And again, it's just as easy as, instead of sending this traffic out the public interface or backhauling it with force tunneling, just say that any traffic leaving my, private virtual network or my private address space going to the internet now just goes through this magical Azure firewall service, right? Which behind the scenes you can set thresholds and you can scale it. A lot of the complexity is now largely gone.
So I've talked to customers who have physical appliances, and they're of the mindset that I made this massive investment in some insert network appliance manufacturer name here that's designed and optimized for handling massive amounts of throughput. I want to use that investment to funnel everything through. Like how do you compare and contrast some of these virtual appliance solutions or first-party services to something like that a customer to a customer who thinks that their on-premises investments are, that they should be using those or exploiting those more heavily.
Well, I mean, if you have a still viable physical investment you've already made, and the user experience or application performance is not an issue,
that's a valid path. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
you may want to continue to use it.
Okay.
If you need to go into a new region, or you need to scale, or you hit your hardware refresh, don't go out and buy the next physical appliance. Right? Look at the new ways of doing things, either with virtual appliances or attached services as well. We've placed more focus, I think, in IT, and rightfully so, on modernizing the applications. Now it is time to actually modernize the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And in some cases, we can move it to something that looks radically different than what we've done in the past. But there are some options to trade, as you mentioned, trade legacy physical for now cloud virtual, right?
Okay.
Or an attached service.
So I think we've been talking a lot about the physical parts of this complexity and some of the reasons why we do and don't, kind of the harder costs of these things. What about the softer costs? Or like really where I see a lot of customers is I don't trust cloud today. So in our when we're dragging it out of the cloud and then we check it and then we push it back in, that's really sometimes in cases a form of trust. I trust me. Right,
Yes.
I'm doing what I'm doing. So how do you deal with how have we dealt with our own internal kind of a trust model, right?
A few different ways, and it depends on who you ask.
Yeah, put you on the spot
So, to some extent, you need to trust your cloud service provider.
here.
Right? If they're going to run the infrastructure, in the old days, we had hosters.
Right.
Right? You had to trust the person that hosted you
Right.
to some extent.
Right.
There are always safeguards. You want to keep your secrets yours and yours private. There's services we built in our cloud, and other cloud service providers build things to do things like key escrow and secrets escrow. But to some extent, you have to trust your infrastructure provider. You have
Right.
to trust that cloud service provider. With your own stuff within your own tenancy, we do have to start to peel things back to, just because it felt good to own it in total and to do something that looked familiar, some of those old techniques or old ways of doing things might not be the best outcome anymore in the cloud. Some of them may not apply at all.
Sure.
So, the natural reaction, from a network security perspective was, between you and anything else, there needs to be a firewall, stateful firewall,
Yeah.
right? And there may need to be this full stack of, security capabilities that do deep inspection on packets. If all the traffic is encrypted now and you're not cracking that encryption, the deep inspection might not work anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or, because you no longer own the network topology, where do you put that control point?
Yeah.
Right? You don't own that choke point anymore, where you can clearly say between point A and point B, this is where I'm going to put my security device.
Yeah.
You may have to completely rethink that. The other thing is, so I think some of the old security controls were very written around solutions, right? Again,
Yes.
it has to be a firewall. Where some of the conversations we needed to have was really, what purpose does that firewall provide?
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
what is the risk and threat behind why you said we needed a firewall in the first place?
Right.
So peel back, a few layers into that discussion around, what is that risk and threat that you're trying to address? Does it even apply in this scenario? And if it does, maybe we need to go look for what we call a new compensating control.
Yep.
So,
Good. That's a good
and
point.
does that compensating control now come from somewhere, someone else?
So how do I
rather-
deal though if I'm in a regulated industry where the industry is dictating
Banking,
solutions
healthcare.
or all those
PCI,
Oh,
yes.
listen, ooh, careful, we don't want to offend nobody. But you know what I'm saying is we often default to what our auditors and our risk makers and policy makers are telling us to do, right? And we usually have very little voice in that. So how do we bring them along too? And just real quickly.
Well, you have to. We continue to influence the industry, right? And show the industry that this new way of doing things is as good, or even sometimes better than the old way of doing things, more effective.
Well, that's the hope, right? That's a goal.
Yes,
We want to
it
improve,
is the goal,
right?
You don't want to take a step backwards in terms of operational
Right.
security capabilities.
Right.
But the old way of doing things may not work anymore. So I mean, if you can clearly demonstrate that the old way of doing things doesn't work anymore, it's going to be more akin to considering the new thing.
Sure.
But then also we've gone out and we've pushed the envelope. We've actually demonstrated that the new thing works, right, and is more effective in a lot of cases
Yeah.
than the old way of doing things. But there is some element of audit and legal and regulatory bodies, they take a while to catch up.
Sure. Yeah.
The other thing that I think we've learned to do over time is not focus on that edge case. There's a lot of opportunity beyond, the highly regulated, highly sensitive stuff to move that stuff to the cloud, get it off your plate, get it out of the way, while you focus on the harder problems of the stuff that might undergo more scrutiny or be more sensitive.
Great. I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So too, one of the things I like into a lot of people's journeys, and especially in the networking space, is they're used to, you called out, was pulling all that telemetry out of the solutions, right? And we can see and feel, and we know if we push this way, we get a response this way. But now the cloud takes it, and now we don't have that sensory or that ability to have that immediate satisfaction of telemetry sometimes. Now it's off in a different space, and I maybe have to get it differently. How did Microsoft, how did we come around to doing that differently? And then also now kind of switching from the Cessna to the Airbus model, right? It's all fly-by-wire versus stick and rudder and cable, right?
Yep. A few different ways. I mean, the whole transition away from, centralized IT to DevOps means that we have a lot of that telemetry now no longer goes back to the central IT organization. It goes to the people that actually own the application and service, and sometimes even the business. So instead of getting your information from deep packet inspection to figure out, whether we're seeing some anomalous behavior or somebody who's leaking data, now they're using Azure Security Center or Application Insights or something else that is more tied to that particular application than it is tied to the infrastructure. It was, hard and sometimes, not really, I won't say possible, but it was really difficult when everybody was kind of lumped onto the same infrastructure. We were watching everybody's applications leaving the same edge to figure out who was doing what was normal. If I can focus it more on, I understand that this is this application, then things like behavior analysis and anomaly detection become more
And you have this application talks to this set of microservices or backend, and this database you can set up rules. And if you see an anomaly outside those rules, now you look.
Where if it's easier to look at your family. Your family of 4 or 6 or however many people it is, and understand what's normal and what's not normal. Your family's not normal, by the way. I know that, and I know that. But, put them into a stadium full of 50,000 people,
that's hard to pick them out.
And try to pick them out. That's what we were dealing with at an infrastructure level. Where if you look at the Microsoft Redmond campus, there's several tens of thousands of people. We have hundreds of gigabits of traffic exiting our private network, going to the internet, and things coming back in. Lumping that all together and trying to understand what was happening from an infrastructure perspective was difficult, right? It's the needle in the haystack problem. And the haystack continued to get bigger. And the needles didn't get more complicated. Where, when we can start to slice this up and say, this is this application, this is this business function, this is this ecosystem, and you can start to really profile it, like you said, figure out what's normal for that particular thing, and that's more effective than trying to look at it from this giant infrastructure.
And I have to imagine that approach also lends itself well to not needing to invest in very expensive pieces of network infrastructure. If you have go into my, I don't want to say that all end-tier applications or web applications are simple, but if you have kind of just the monolith application that traditionally is deployed, web tier, middle tier, and database tier, what that communication pattern looks like. You can put in rules like ACLs, network policies to restrict. Okay, only allow these to talk over port 443 and nothing else. And now you don't need an expensive firewall or a piece of equipment in it.
I can bake that into the application design. I can security review that. I can baseline what is normal. I can deploy that as a template. And then if anything deviates from that, desired state configuration can come around and fix it. So, I mean, there's a lot of power, especially now with everything is software defined, everything is logical, that I can do exactly that, where in the past, we would throw these VMs out there on the infrastructure, and then somebody would have to cut another ticket or a set of tickets to get a security review, and then pass that off to the policy boundary people who would have to go in and program the load balancer, program the firewalls, do all this other kind of stuff.
And you're still doing that stateful packet inspection at the edge or
looking
whatever.
for the needle.
Right, so now, everything can come in a pre-configured template that is signed and tagged and everything else that ARM policy can apply to, and we can deploy that in one shot and make sure that it's compliant from day 0, day 1, whatever you want to call it, and then keep it compliant over time. Where in the past it was this very disjointed deployment effort, and admittedly very poor lifecycle management around it, that as these applications sat there in the environment, we did see drift. We did see holes start to open up.
Yeah.
People
And-
connecting those remote those machines and
If we ever
make
had
configuration
to,
changes.
if we ever had to
yeah.
move them around
Oh,
or
gosh.
scale them up and down, it was
Yeah.
a whole other nightmare to make that happen.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Do you have anything else you want to highlight or kind of talk about?
Just that, again, peel all of your notions around, operational practices and security policies back to kind of their intent, right? Don't just assume that everything that you do can or should just be picked up and applied to the cloud, right? Kind of peel it back a few layers and try to figure out why do I need to do this, right? Is there a better way to do this?
Yeah.
And timing may be a challenge for you. If you want to move fast, sometimes the path of least resistance and the safest path is the best option that you have at the time.
Yeah.
But don't necessarily try to hang on to that too hard, right? If you see an opportunity to do something differently, to do something better, cloud gives you a lot of options to do that, I think, in ways that in the old IT environment where you had, long lead times and huge, money investments that had to stick for many, many years, it was difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And if you wanted to change your, be agile and change your path, it was an uphill battle because I've already spent the money, I've already put it in, and it took me 6 months. You're going to make me change now?
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to do that with the cloud anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you for sharing
Good
that.
points. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good.
And that's a wrap.